Wonderful. Well, thank you for those who have joined so far. You have joined into the Records Manager Roundtable with the Greater Sacramento ARMA chapter. So we're just going to give a few minutes to get everyone joined. There's quite a few people coming in. So the first 10 minutes, we're just kind of hanging out and waiting for people to come in. This is one of our first, no, I wouldn't say first, second virtual meeting, because we had done one with Fleming last year on information governance. But this is the first one where we're actually doing a lot of participation, where people would actually be able to talk and show themselves. So we're still learning. Thank you so much for joining us. And why don't I try sharing, because I put together some slides. So let me try that while everyone's starting to come in. Try to do two things at the same time. See if this will work. All right, do you see my slides, Chuck? The big slide?
Yeah, I see the slide with Records Manager Roundtable, but I don't see any bullet points or anything like that.
Oh, not yet. That's just the cover. So.
Oh, I see.
Perfect. Just want to make sure it can be seen. And I'm admitting a couple more people in. So why don't I go ahead and move over to the agenda. For those who don't know me, hello, I'm Nitza Medina-Garcia, Vice President of the Greater Sacramento ARMA chapter. And first 10 minutes, we're just kind of hanging out, trying to get everyone in. I'm trying to make sure, because Zoom has this little waiting room. So I want to make sure I'm getting everyone in before we officially start. And so I have muted everyone as they come in. And then what I'd like to do is to utilize the chat feature. Let me make sure I get chat as well, so I can see any messages. So as we're waiting, if you want to put into the chat room what your biggest challenge is in regards to remote working and records management, information governance at this time. I know that a lot of people are remotely working, and so it presents some challenges. So our workshop today is going to be just a knowledge share, trying to help each other go through this time where a lot of us are moving very quickly in order to get through this process. So if you have a chance as we're going through, either now or during our conversation, I'll be keeping an eye, and Doug will be helping me as well. Doug, our secretary of the chapter, will also be helping as well in regards to looking at the chat. So let's see.
And real quick, Nitza, you may be showing your slides kind of in the presenter view, because okay. I can see two slides at once, so I can see the next slide as well.
That is not what I wanted.
Yeah. And if you had any notes, I would be able to see those as well.
Let me move this.
There you go.
Are you
That looks
better?
good. Yep.
And I might add, everyone really should put something in the chat room. It's really important to get that. I've been working a lot with a lot of other software other than Zoom, and what I've seen is the chat room really will stimulate the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you got to get used to it, but once you get into it, it's really good.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. Okay. So, so why don't I just kind of go over the agenda while we're waiting here. So basically, I wanted to kind of make sure I got everyone in through the waiting room in the first couple minutes. I know Zoom is kind of new for people. And then at 2:10, we wanted to start out with some announcements, and we probably can get started fairly soon. It's 2:07. And we wanted to talk about our chapter announcements. Then we wanted to get into the roundtable. So in the roundtable, we want to talk about your records challenges and questions. And so I want to see what kind of items come in to the chat room. I also have prepared some challenges that the board, we got together yesterday and started talking about, you know, what challenges we're already seeing. So we have some jumping off points, and maybe, you know, people can answer those as well. Before we wrap up at 2:50, we're just going to kind of say what are the top 3 things that we're taking away from today's session. So I'll be passing that over to Chuck Bose, the president of our chapter, at that point, and then we will be adjourning at 3 o'clock. I will be recording our session today, so those who were not able to be a part of this live will be able to refer to it in the future. We'll get it posted on our website. All right. So why don't we go ahead and get started with our announcements? And while we're here, the admissions have slowed down, so I think we can go ahead and move forward. So just wanted to do some introductions. We have Chuck Bose, our president from Information Governance. Do you want to say hi, Chuck?
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Awesome. Myself, Nitza Medina-Garcia, Vice President, also with InfoCompass, Inc. We have Doug Stewart, our Secretary. Would you like to say something, Doug?
Sure. Excited to be here, and welcome, everybody.
Awesome. Then let's see, is Fernando here? Just trying to look in the list to see if our treasurer is here. I don't see him. Maybe he'll pop in later. And then we also have Jen Farnham from, who is our programs director. Let's see, is Jen in? I don't see her. Maybe she'll come in later. But that's our board. And then I also wanted to have another announcement. Normally in April, we have our chapter Records Knowledge Conference that happens. But as many events are happening now that are getting rescheduled, we have ours rescheduled for October 21st of this year. Chuck, did you want to say anything about the Records Knowledge Conference?
Well, it was scheduled for April 30th, and about 5 weeks ago, the board met, realized what was coming, and we were able to reschedule our venue and all of our speakers. So that worked out. Obviously, depending on a lot of things, the digital transformation that has been going on is probably going to be accelerated by what's happened. Pandemic, we've heard of pandemics before, but none of us have lived long enough to have been in one. But there are many, many other things that can present challenges to getting work done, all kinds of things. I mean, just even eating, going to the grocery store. But we're going to do our best as a chapter to reach out and be more proactive, given the tools that are available, to share our information and put together different types of gatherings so that we, our chapter is quite large. It stretches all the way, I think, from Modesto to the Oregon border and somewhere around Fairfield, all the way over to the Nevada border. So this is a good platform for us to shrink that and bring everybody together more frequently. So we'll save some other announcements for the end of the session, but please look forward to the Records Knowledge Conference in October. It'll either be live at the Galleria Library, downtown Sacramento, or we will hold a virtual conference. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. So as Chuck was saying, we are looking to do many of our future chapter meetings virtually, at least in the short term. And then as things progress, we'll see if we can continue to have both in-person as well as virtual meetings. Okay. So for those who may have just joined us, I've been asking if you can put in the chat message what your biggest challenge that you're working on with your organization, either if it's a challenge or if it's a question that you have that you're trying to solve. I would like to have everyone submit information there, and then we can kind of go through and talk about the different topics. So we'll go ahead and move on to some of the challenges that we're all experiencing. So I'm going to go and look in the chat message. So Doug, have you seen some coming in yet? I think.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Okay. So,
so the first one was from Vicky, and she notes that the biggest issue for her has been network issues. Using virtual desktop is it looks like it freezes sometimes. And she's also not been able to get remote desktop to work. So, but communicating via email or phone has been fine. So yeah, I would imagine a lot of IT departments are been working around the clock to help out their end users and their customers to get them connected correctly to the office.
Right, right. So definitely, I think there's been a lot of ramp up for many organizations who may not have had, maybe they had some remote ways to get remote, but maybe they weren't expecting everybody needing that access. And so, there's been this big ramp up where people either having to purchase more licenses or getting more bandwidth and whatnot. So it's definitely something to work around. So Vicki, I'm wondering if you're able to unmute yourself and maybe talk a little bit more about what you're experiencing there. Since you're not, so it sounds like remote desktop has been not as successful yet. Have you been using any of the other sort of virtual meeting software like the Zoom or anything to do communication?
Yeah, we have Blue Jeans at our office. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, I've been using Blue Jeans for some of the meetings and trainings and stuff. It's been working actually pretty good. Virtual desktop works most of the time, I would say, but when it gets glitchy, then it's like you gotta log all the way out and log back in. Seems like there's just a lot of, and I know it's the whole remote thing, but you're logging into things a lot more than you would normally from the office. So
right,
that's kind of the frustrating side of it.
Right.
But I understand we're trying to keep everything secure. And in our department, it's kind of like you said, we had a few people that worked remotely on occasion, but not the whole department all at once. So it really did kind of tax our IT shop to get everybody up and running. So they're still just dealing with the fallout of that whole mass connection.
Right.
Vicki, could I ask a question?
Sure.
What do you do? I mean, what's your department do? What's your mission and all of that?
So the department that I work for is the Department of Toxic Substances Control. So
Yes.
our mission is to make sure, environments, land or property that people are living and working on is free of harmful chemicals. So that's kind of our overall mission.
So you deal with the public.
Yeah, some of our program people, they deal with the public. They've had to kind of put a lot of those meetings on hold because they'll have, public access meetings where they talk to people about, a certain property that they're working on, what the contamination is, what the plan is to clean it up. But they've been postponing those meetings, obviously, because they don't want to get groups of people together, have meetings.
So a virtual capability that is more elegant than what we have now would help you to avoid having to have physical meetings and still get the job done there.
Yeah, that's true.
So I see.
What about?
So I see.
I was going to say, what about?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say.
Well, what about electronic signatures? What about getting wet signatures and things like that? Is that a problem?
Yeah, so we currently, we're not set up for electronic signatures yet. Something that's kind of being kicked around with our legal department, but it's not something that's doing at this time. So they're not able.
Yeah, I don't know why
able to do any of
legal departments. My experience is that legal departments in state agencies and departments are very slow to catch up to the 1990 the Global e-Sign Act in UITA. So
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but it is. And usually you have to take it to them in black and white and say, take a look at this. And then they go, oh, all right.
So I saw in
That's
the
my
chat
experience.
that Charlie said you might want to check your download speed, Vicki. That might be helpful.
Yeah, I saw that. I do have a situation where my husband is also working from home. So we have both of us, so it's taken a lot more probably bandwidth. But, we have Comcast as our provider and we pay for a higher level of service, we thought, but, maybe we're just taxing it out now.
You know what it is? I, within the last 3 months, upgraded our what do you call that router, for the Wi-Fi, because within the last year or so, I guess there's some sort of better way of making, especially with, nowadays we have like 10, at least 10 things connecting all at once, right? And so depending on who's connecting, you may want to get have it prioritized. And so there is some newer equipment out there now that kind of helps with that provisioning. So definitely.
We're actually looking at upgrading that equipment.
Great.
Part of our plan.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vicki. I will see if I can get another one on our list. So we see, hi, Amy. Amy from the Golden Gate chapter is here. And so, Amy, your biggest challenge is giving the information to attorneys that are only found in paper. I could see that being a challenge. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit more about what's currently happening? If you want to unmute yourself.
I think I did it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have to get to the right screen. I'm doing this on my phone.
Oh, okay.
Anyhow, well, we have kind of a workaround. We do have someone going into the office from accounting to pick up checks and make sure that, things that need to be gotten for the accounting department are gotten and checks are deposited and checks are sent out and all that kind of stuff. And we do have someone in the records department who is going in once a week to handle anything that people have requested that is in paper that she needs to scan and send to people. So I don't know how legal it is in terms of the stay-at-home orders, but we've got to have the office be able to function. And since we are doing everything else remote, it's not too many people going in at any one time. I mean, usually one person is in there at a time. So keeping our distances.
I know that, well, being a law firm as you are, you're an essential business. So I can certainly see why you would need to have people go in and periodically check on your offices and pick up mail and do whatnot. I was, last week, I attended the DC chapter of ARMA, and a few of the law firms from the DC chapter were doing similar things as well, and kind of spacing out from the records team who was coming in, kind of rotating it, and making sure that there was the social distance while they were, maybe picking up some things that needed to be scanned, or maybe one person was in per day, and making sure that those social distance was in place. So I can certainly see how, that is necessary during this time.
Yeah. Hey, Amy, this is Doug. A follow-up question that I had was, did your company, or did the building that your company's based in, did they restrict access to badges and you locking down using badges and things? Because in our offices, we've been told that people that were deemed not to be essential, their badges wouldn't even swipe any longer, just to keep people from potentially getting into offices.
I believe that we had to give them a list of people who would be coming in so that they would be aware of them. It's very few people. I think I can name maybe 4 people who are going into the office at any, during any week, never at the same time. And our whole building is secure, so we all have to enter with a badge, and the doors are locked. So you need your badge just to get into where the security desk is before you can even get to the elevators. So, and I'm pretty sure it may be that if I went in and was not authorized, they might not let me in. So, but I'm not certain.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me keep looking and seeing if there's anybody has any other suggestions. So as I'm going through, if you have like suggestions, or you want to say, hey, I have an idea that might be helpful, certainly put that in there in the chat room, and we'll add to the conversation. But I would think that with this stay-at-home shelter-in-place order, where now it's more difficult to get to paper files, that this kind of highlights, the necessity of getting our information in electronic form. And so, although you don't necessarily want to use an emergency like this, but at least you can highlight that having your information electronically accessible, and investing in those processes and tools are going to help you during these sort of times.
Yeah,
I think it's important. I think it's important to recognize that most of the advances in records management have been preceded by some disaster. I mean, some of the big leaps in records management. I could go through a litany of them, but I think most of you are familiar with, 9/11, for example, pointed out how some firms were able to operate even though their office was destroyed in the Twin Towers, because they had taken the initiative and made their systems redundant. That's just one example. There are many, many others, floods and other kinds of things. So perhaps the pandemic will be precede another records management leap in terms of what Nitza was just talking about, which is accelerating the digital transformation and getting us all prepared for the next disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
I was going to add almost a similar point, but just a little more comically. But there was I saw a comic today that basically, a cartoon that basically had some folks having a meeting in an office saying, hey, our digital transformation process is right on target. You know, we're making good progress. And then there's a big wrecking ball that said COVID-19 right outside the wall. And I was thinking, you know, you could replace it with, like you just said, 9/11 or Sandy or Katrina, or, you know, any big disaster, and say the same thing. You know, it's definitely made people leap forward in terms of looking at their systems. I'm just making sure your backup data center isn't located in the same building as your primary data center. I mean, that
Right.
just little things. But.
Right. So let's see, the next comment I have from, it looks like RSL Leap. My biggest issue transition from hard copy records to electronic records through the pandemic while working from home. So would you like to unmute yourself as well and see if, you know, what you want to add to that comment?
Hi, everyone. It's Araceli.
Hi.
I transitioned actually from the records management industry into the legal department of a construction company.
Okay.
So my biggest challenge working from a document management system, going back to hard copies, that's what I'm currently facing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We do have one person in the office who deals with pretty much all the hard copies, from mail to filing our mechanic liens and sending them via FedEx and so forth. And of course, dealing with our daily court filings. But the biggest issue for our office or for our department is knowing that this has stopped us, I would say about 50% of our work or more, because we're accustomed to hard copies. So I've been with the company a little bit over a year, and that has been our biggest challenge, not only for me, but for those of us that are new from day one. Just trying to transition how to work with the one person that's in the office to scan all the hard copies and send them to us, and finding somewhat of setting up a system as a DMS system. And that's the huge challenge that I face, because we do not have a document management system. Everything's saved into a drive.
Right.
So I don't know who else is experiencing this out there. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one, but any advice that you guys could provide where I could work? I mean, I'm starting off from a records management center from the 1980s, I feel.
Well, I think it's just like any other organization that's just starting out with their process is just, I think the first is just trying to get through this immediate, you know, scanning things where you can, so that people can have access to those paper documents remotely. So I think you're already on the right path, but I think this will give you like ammunition to say, you know, look, we need a document management system. You know, we can't just rely on, you know, file shares or what have you. And so there are some, you know, different software that is definitely available, whether you're, you know, start off with something like, you know, most people have something like Microsoft already, but, you know, and then, you know, move on to something a little more advanced. But I think this definitely gives you that evidence that something needs to be elevated or advanced. I don't know if anybody else had anything else to say.
Well, I've spoken with a number of state departments who are taking the same approach. They don't have an electronic records system, electronic or document management system in place, but to try to bridge, they are scanning to a specific drive, and people who are working remotely are coming in through virtual private networks and accessing a specific node or area in the system to retrieve that information. And that, can work for the immediate short term. But, this kind of, it's sad to remind everyone that imaging first emerged in the mid-'80s. Fairly sophisticated electronic document management software began to emerge in the, I would say, no later than the mid-'90s. It's 25 years from that, and we just keep putting it off and kicking the can down the road as a society and people in work environments. Again, disasters bring about some, oh my God, I really need to upgrade. I really need to change my process. I need to bring in new resources to be able to weather these things. Plus, in that re-engineering, of course, comes new ideas about being more efficient, doing more with less, that sort of thing. The state of California recently passed a law setting up a working group through the government organization agency to take a very hard look at some basic technology shifts to upgrade the way that at least state government would manage their records. And that is ongoing right now. But Doug and others perhaps who are signed in can speak to the issue of electronic document management software has been available. It's very robust. And depending on what your needs are, it's not that expensive. But cleaning up the mess, if you let it go for what, a year, 2, 10 years, and then you've got all this material, and you've not managed it, you've not managed it, and certainly not managed it in a records retention schedule method, so that it creates all kinds of problems. The difficulty we have as records managers is getting the attention of those that we work for to say, look how much better it could be. Look how compliance is a better place to be than out of compliance and catching up in a disaster. So there's the compliance issue, but there's the important issue that we're discussing right now, which is the workload, getting the work done, being able to continue to work during a disaster. So hope that helps.
Thank you, Chuck, and thanks, Araceli.
Thank you both.
So I see another item, Osario. You said you have the same challenge, attorneys expecting to print emails and add them to physical files instead of just saving them into our system. So I would say, with my experience of working with attorneys, I would think that some of it is generational. Some of it is, I guess, trust in being able to find the information. Because if the attorney trusted that they could find that email out of the document management system, I don't think they would necessarily need to print out that document and save it into a hard copy file, because the being able to find that information quickly later, it's definitely not going to be as quick if you have your document management system organized correctly, comparing getting something physical versus electronic. So, Osari, do you want to talk a little bit more about this challenge and, what you're seeing?
Yeah, so basically, we are being proactive, and most of the attorneys in our office, definitely follow procedure, but we do have some holdouts, as I'm sure other offices do, and that's a challenge. So I'm actually going to the office once a week to pick up literally like boxes and try to go ahead and make sure that the documents are filed correctly, and that's the thing. So I have an inbox that I inherited from a person who left the firm with over 1,500 emails that he expects us to go ahead and, and print each one of them. And that's, my conversations with the office administrator have been, that's a tall order to begin with, but also, how we can start a conversation with this specific attorney and just tell him how more efficient he would be right now with the shelter-in-place order. Him trying to go ahead and provide the services to his clients while we do our job and saving the documents accordingly.
Right. So does your firm have maybe criteria of when they do when they transfer out the files out of the firm, maybe, whatever that file, the original format it was, that's going to be the original, the copy format, maybe that might be a way to get around that and take the burden off of your firm on the transfer process. So I don't know if that might be helpful.
Yep. Thank you.
But there's also a book that ARMA wrote. So if you're familiar with the ARMA bookstore, there is a book on matter mobility. So basically when when files leave the firm, with some really good checklists in it as well. So if you haven't seen that, definitely, check that book out. It's a really small book, but it has a lot of good information in it about the transfer process.
Okay. What's the name again?
It's one of the ARMA books. I will find your email and send it to you after the meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And sorry, this is Doug. I have a kind of a follow-up question. What about well, it's funny. I left the law firm environment 20 years ago, and that was our battle then about trying to get people to use the DMS for email versus printing out copies and putting them into the paper files. But so keep up the good fight there. But what about notes and things too? Because that's where I could see there's still a lot of hand note takers and stuff. How, especially in this remote and distributed office environment, how are you coping with that issue of handwritten notes for attorneys that generally do need to be preserved?
So I think that was for Osario. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in my experience, this is Edgar again. My experience, we actually have a few attorneys who have iPad Pros, and they have the stylus that goes with it, and they can literally go ahead and save the notes, and they look just like regular notes. So we still get a lot of the paper notes on the pads. So, but I was thinking that was a really good investment.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I do for mine. I have a iPad Pro with the app Notability, so you can take notes, and then you could actually record as well the interview, and then touch that word, and it'll go back to that part of the recording. So it's definitely a step up from paper.
Was that a hard transition, Nitza, to go from paper to using the iPad?
No, there was like two things that were gotchas for me when I started using my iPad. One is I had to make sure that my stylus was also always had enough energy, which you don't have to worry about when there's a pencil, right? And the other part is not writing to the very bottom of the iPad, because, you know, like with a piece of paper, you can go all the way to the bottom, but then I would accidentally hit the home button and get out of my app. So it's all user error. But instead of me having like 10 different paper notepads and then thinking, oh yeah, I wrote something about this, you know, with it being electronic, then once again, when you want to retrieve that note, you can search for it. Or if you actually enabled the recording feature when you're doing an interview, you can jump to that part of the recording. So I did that with one of my clients. Very helpful.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. All right, so let me look to the next one here. So I have a comment here from Jennifer Tillery. Hope I'm saying your name right. You can use DocuSign for obtaining signatures. It's super easy, efficient, and the turnaround is great. So that brings up another challenge that organizations are having in regards to things that you normally did in person, like a wet signature. For those who haven't been doing that, now using something like DocuSign or other electronic signature tools to be able to get those contract signs or get the signatures they need. Jennifer, do you want to mention anything else about your experience?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. So our experience has been great so far. We absolutely love it for those reasons that I stated. It is very simple. I mean, I know converting physical records, that's the hard part, but if you have it electronically already, it's super easy. You just upload it, enter in the name of who needs to sign it and the order. If there's multiple signatures, then you just shoot it off. The turnaround is great, and it's a time saver, and and it's amazing. Hold on, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my mom hat, my child. 1 second.
Yeah, almost all of us are doing that. Awesome. Thank you so much.
DocuSign is one of the early pieces of software available for e-signatures. They've been around, gosh, 18, 19 years. Anyway, as you move toward government situations, it becomes more complicated. In California, anyway, the Secretary of State is in control of those issues as they relate, again, to state government. And if you are in state government and you're dealing with other state entities, it's fairly straightforward. But if you're government and you are dealing with the public, it becomes much more complicated. And I'm not sure that the Secretary of State's the best place for that responsibility. That can be a question for debate. But for government dealing with the public, DocuSign has a few holes in it and presents a problem. The other issue, of course, is the extent to which your document management system can link all of the elements of a particular file together. How you file that, do you have to do it manually? Is it automatic? Do you set it up in advance? For the DocuSign software. Lastly, I'll just say that for the real estate industry and mortgage lenders, in California, it is required that you have a wet signature at the actual closing. But you can use DocuSign, for example, or similar software for all of the disclosures and that sort of thing. So right up to the closing, you can use DocuSign, but you can't use it for the notary and for the wet signatures on the deed of trust and that sort of thing. Any questions?
Yeah, I noted that that in other states other than California, they started looking at having like a remote notary because of this time period that we're in where we can't be all in the same place. And I know one of my clients, they started adding to their client matter file a folder for a video, any video, because basically for those states that are doing a remote or are allowing a remote notary, I guess they're doing some sort of video of the signature as a bit of a verification. And so they have to that.
I think it's more of a contextual question of, you know, were the parties actually signing, and it's like a deposition in that sense.
Right. So then, you know, they're now those recordings are now going to need to be saved, and then there becomes the question of, you know, how long you keep those recordings, and, you know, for the same time period as the file. And then now, you know, recordings are going to take up a lot more space in your networks than a piece of paper did or a scan did. So now you have not only that, but then depending on how many signatures you're doing, you know, that can be a big, you know, issue for your systems.
Yep. Although the good news is that storage is cheap, bandwidth is getting cheaper. And as you mentioned earlier, the new technologies are I mean, Wi-Fi is almost as good as I want to say, I think Cat 5. So, which is a pretty big pipe. So that Nitza, I think that's the least of our worries, is the size of those files. Although, I mean, they can get really big, I suppose. It depends on the format.
I think not only, well, it's just one example of recordings that are new essentially documents that we're having now. So that's going to be those kind of recordings. Now with these virtual meetings and the ability to record meetings, now, you know, are people, you know, does your organization have a policy on when to record a meeting, when not, when to save a chat, when not? So now we have to start thinking about, you know, our normal information governance, records management responsibilities. We need to, you know, provide some guidance so that it doesn't become the Wild West out there. And once again, we have, you know, just like the file shares, it's just, you know, crazy and everybody's doing their own thing. So if we as records management, information governance professionals can help put together some guidelines that then the people at your firm can then, you know, utilize as a policy, then I think we're going to, you know, give a lot of value to our organizations. Let's see, who's next? So I think we got Jennifer, we talked about Angela, and then let's see, Amy, you said you're filing emails into your electronic system. Awesome, viewing emails, got full buy-in, great.
Question there, are those emails in the filing system electronic tied to the retention schedule?
Hi, Amy here, with a cat in my hands. We don't have a retention schedule, so I would say, yes, they sort of are, because we have no retention schedule. So, yeah, if we did, they would be tied in with it. We've been filing them. We had Autonomy Records Manager, FileSurf for many, many years. And so we had, we're filing all of our emails that way. And now we've moved over to iManage, so they've moved into iManage. But
so how do you know when it's time for disposition of a particular email? We
have no retention policy, so we don't dispose of any. We keep
Right.
them all.
So, your records management policy is to keep everything?
That's the policy of the firm. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And often you see that in law firms. They either
Yeah.
keep everything, or they, when the matter's over, they send the file to their client.
It's also partly because of the nature of our work. We deal with employee benefit plans, and a lot of those have extremely long, they're basically like a state law that
Right.
as long
Almost
as someone,
permanent files.
almost permanent for the most part. Yeah. There's a lot of things that we could dispose of, but until they make the decision that they're going to go, well, we really should have retention policy, I'm not going to waste any more of my time. You know, if you can't get buy-in from, if they're not going to bring it up, it's not worth it to me to start to do it. So, but one of these days there will be. Whether I'll still be at the firm, who knows? We'll see.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. So I think this is probably a good spot to transition, Chuck, into the top things that we've learned over today's session. So I think we've kind of already talked through a lot of the challenges that I had on the slide. So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward in the interest of time. What would you say are kind of the top 3 things that you got from today's session?
You're asking everyone?
No, that's for you, Chuck.
Oh, for me, sorry. Well, what I got from what we were talking about is that everyone is impacted one way or the other by disaster. And we're going through one right now. And everybody is realizing that if they were better prepared, it would be a lot easier. And that some are learning that, oh my gosh, this can be much more efficient if we, move in this direction and prepare for the next disaster. The other thing is that it's kind of in the background of our discussion that we have our cat on our lap, or our daughter yelling mommy, or all these kinds of things that are part of our normal lives. But when we want to do work, or we're in a conference or something, that the other part of our lives invade this space. And so it's a little bit hard to, if you're not used to it, it's a little bit hard to isolate yourself into a space where you don't have those kinds of interruptions. That's what I took away from our discussion primarily. Did you want to ask for other contribution from our attendees?
Sure. Anybody else want to add to it? I see Charlie, you added, you just got reinforcement that everybody has some common problems. Is that true, Charlie? Yeah, I think you did.
There we are. Yeah. We think we're unique, but and that's getting back to the reason why you join ARMA in the first place. At least I did, especially a chapter. You want to talk with people that have the same problems, and maybe together you could come up with a better solution, or at least a different approach. So, but you're not alone when you talk about these problems. So that's why I said you ought to talk more offline or in some other way with the people that are in this meeting. And I'm sure if you don't know them, Nitza and Chuck will give you their email addresses so you can share more ideas and have discussions.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
ARMA is about is networking so that we can, build those relationships to be able to share knowledge.
Yeah, and if we don't have the answers, we're going to have a virtual cocktail party so that we can all, sob together.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
For those of you that do have records retention schedules, how do you go about making sure that each department is following that retention schedule? For example, I work for the city clerk's office, and we're in charge of records management. So my question is, how do you enforce or make sure that each department, is staying on top of it?
I'm happy to address that, Nitza.
Mm-hmm.
And Doug, you may want to chime in as well. Essentially, that's what the information governance architecture is all about. Essentially, that you have an agreement on what the rules are going to be. So it's sort of a three-tiered kind of approach. So you have essentially a council or a group of people that get together and set the policy. So now you've got the policy. Now to your question, how do you enforce it? Well, the information governance model or architecture gives you the tools to be able to enforce it, of course, in an electronic manner. It's easier to do, although there is a physical component to it. And then the bottom tier of the three-tier architecture is the various storage media. And typically that was the problem prior to the information governance model, was that you had software that did all these things, but you didn't have the ability to enforce it. And so, Doug, did you want to chime in or comment on that?
Well, I would also add to that, I think that's a great way to look at it, but I'd also add just audit and accountability. Basically people do have to be held accountable, and the only way to know if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing is through audits. I also have a background in info security, and the only way you can know that places are actually following through on what they're supposed to be doing is to go in and actually audit.
Right. I would agree.
Great question.
Yeah.
Did we answer your question?
Yes, you did. Yeah. I was just thinking, I don't want to go and be the records retention police. So I was looking for different strategies on how to, nicely put it without, having to enforce it. Because at the end of the day, it should be on, the department heads and stuff to at least get on the same page. And it falls on the clerk's office, but I would hope that like department heads and managers would be, pushing for that because it's required.
So you need to get buy-in without a doubt. The audit function is also very important because people know that they're going, potentially going to get audited, and there might be some sanctions. But what you're talking about is the records manager cannot be the police. It has to be an organization-wide agreed policy, and that everyone is expected to follow that policy. And the policy is not just from the records manager, it's from a consortium of different perspectives, including legal, top management, security, and a lot of other things, depending on the organization. So you're right, it's not fair and not feasible to make the records manager the policeman of an organization. It just doesn't really work. It used to work when you had, perhaps you're too young to remember the days of the records room, and you had people who managed the records room, and you needed a record, you had to go to the records room and sign it out. And they knew who you were and where you worked and all that sort of thing. So if they needed that record back, they knew who to go find. As we moved away from that model, records managers lost control.
Thank you, Chuck. So I got a comment from Ben saying, bring it up with the executive to have a records retention month where you advertise your office's consulting services. to all parts of the organization, which is a great segue to some of the resources that I have showing here on the slide. And if you didn't know, April is Records and Information Management Month. So definitely a good topic to bring up. I did put some links to the ARMA resources that we have. On the ARMA International page, there's some COVID-19 resources that you'll want to check out that can help you through this time. Both there's some free and low cost items. There's also an ARMA RIM month page that ARMA International also has. And there's some promo code discounts for items there, as well as some free items for those who are members. And then I also included some links to some other items for those who are making that transition to working virtually or collaborating virtually. You may want to know more about how to use different tools. So in LinkedIn, there's a free course over an hour's worth of videos on remote working and some best practices. So if you're interested in these slides, I can certainly, send a copy out to the group so that you can get access to these items. I also included some, for those who don't have some meeting tools yet, some information that I have. I'm also on the board of directors for the Elk Grove Chamber of Commerce, and we put together some information for those organizations who are looking for some virtual tools. But I wanted to say before we left off, since it is 3 o'clock, that if you want more information about our chapter, the Greater Sacramento ARMA chapter, definitely look up our website because we will be posting future events on there, and to find out more information about us. And thank you from InfoCompass for attending our seminar. Chuck or Doug, you have anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Well, I'd like to remind everyone that for 20 years, we've held the Records Knowledge Conference, and we both do basic records management, and we reach out into what appears to be either problems that we're suffering from that we haven't solved yet, or to new challenges coming over the horizon. So we've had presentations on blockchain, IoT, digital transformation, all these kinds of things, while at the same time grounding everything back to basic records management issues. So please put October 21st on your calendar, and if we have a physical records knowledge conference in Sacramento, we'd love to have you attend. And I guess I would like to ask, has anyone other than the ARMA chapter board attended a Sacramento chapter records knowledge conference? And lastly, if you have some suggestions for information that you would like to see covered at the Records Knowledge Conference or at another session like this, please share it with Nitza, through our website, or email Nitza or me. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and have a
Thank you all.
wonderful
Appreciate
afternoon.
it.
Thank you.